We are recording. Awesome.
Okay.
All right. So first of all, thank you again for doing this. I really appreciate that. We are very excited to chat with you about this opportunity. And I guess to start, I would just like, would you mind introducing yourself to the
Sure.
people?
Absolutely. So my name is Lyn Jones, although I go by Lynn, and I'm Dr. J to my students. That's what they've always called me. I don't know how it got started, but 10 years ago I became Dr. J. So I embrace that. I am an assistant teaching professor in the Department of English, and I teach in 4 of the 5 areas that the department offers. I teach in English education, creative writing, the writing program, and the African American Studies minor. And I also work as the education outreach director for the Indiana Writers Center in Indianapolis.
Thank you. That is a full plate. So thank you for being here on this one today. All right. So I guess to start our conversation about immersive learning, how would you describe an immersive learning classroom to someone who may be unfamiliar with the term or completely new to the term immersive learning?
Well, I've written and published papers that have good definitions of that, but the idea of immersive learning is that we immerse our students in experiential experiences, and I call it border crossing. We take them out of the classroom, beyond the walls of an RB 290 classroom, beyond the walls of an RB rubber belt building, and out into the community. And really, for me, and people will define this differently, but for me, true immersive learning should be a reciprocal process. It's not a service learning. We're not giving something to Muncie. There is a reciprocation where we are working with them, and in return they offer us something back. And I think, for me, the true spirit is that students really have an opportunity to see Muncie. They really they know the campus well, and I think there's, and I in any university community there's a divide. There is the campus, and there is the city or the town. And often people don't, unless they work at a university, don't go back and forth. And often there are negative feelings. These students that come and use up all of our resources and do this, and students also might have negative perceptions. So I think that also it can help to break that down so that the community sees the kinds of students we have and learn more about the community. And they get to come to campus. So my students aren't, in my immersive learning, they're not just going out. We bring individuals into campus as well. And really, the former president of Ball State, Joanne Gora, is the one who began this idea, and she really was the one who had that. Certainly, our current president, Mearns, has done even more with it in terms of making it part of the strategic initiative. For me, it's been a real godsend. I'm not sure, to be frank, if I would have stayed in higher education, as it's a third career for me, had I not been able to do immersive learning, because I have always been a community engagement scholar. And I have been doing public memoir and community engagement work for many years with the Writers Center. So for me to be able to take that skill set with all of my various English degrees and put it to use at Ball State is really a blessing. And I have taught 10 different immersive learning classes at this university and had both internal and external community immersive grants.
That is fantastic. There is so much helpful information there. The idea of reciprocation, of border crossing, of community engagement and community building. These are all wonderful insights into what you're doing in these classes. So
Thank
thank
you.
you for that. I suppose
I'm very passionate about it, and
I can tell.
I get really into it and on my soapbox. I hope I wasn't sounding like preachy. It just is something that I feel very passionate about.
Not at all. I think that's all insightful and important information to have, especially about how you approach the topic. Um, with that in mind, I suppose, would you just sort of give us an insight into what your immersive learning class does, how your section works, I guess what your philosophy is in teaching an immersive learning class?
Okay. Well, I will use the current class as an example.
Yes,
Certainly,
definitely.
I've taught different types of immersive learning, but in the current class, the idea was to take students. There was sort of two prongs to it: to write for change, to with a community partner that serves a marginalized population, so that students who are taking a typical 103 and a typical 104 have a focus and a theme for their reading and their writing and their research. Um, and the second part was to loop, meaning students wouldn't just take a 103 with one professor and a 104 with another. This would be a year-long project. I have learned over the years trying to do an effective immersive learning in one semester, it doesn't work as well. It can be done, but truly it needs to be a year. And now, as we're learning, the university is actually moving towards more what are called sustainable 3-year. You know, it takes time and momentum to truly have that reciprocal process and to make change. Because of COVID, I guess here's a bright spot of COVID, we were able to extend this grant for 2 years. So we will have this group of students in 103 and 104 this year, and then next year we will have a new group, but that new group will build upon the work that this group did. Because
So
COVID has
interesting.
really not allowed us to get in the facilities, and that's a reality. My partner is the Muncie Mission. They have had multiple COVID breakouts with the homeless men who live there, with their staff, and certainly they are trying to very much limit outside folks coming in. And that's been difficult because they rely on volunteers. But the more people you have coming into the mix, the more that the virus can spread. So we haven't been able to physically get in there. However, I have had success with our Zoom calls. Bob Scott, who's one of the staff there, who's a wonderful human being, has been really instrumental. And us, we worked together, and we had four almost, I think they were 90 minutes. One was even longer than that. Lengthy Zoom calls where it was Bob and three men who chose to participate. They really want students to understand what it's like, and those were really rich conversations. I was surprised at how much came out of that, how much positive came out of that. And Bob and I have had many Zoom calls with just the students about issues. And students have had to be very well prepared and read and ready with questions and information. And we even had a social one just for fun, and that I ended up being just like one of the best ones because the men all started talking about 70s music. And I don't know how this came up, but I think it was one of the men, Brock. He's just really into music. And he used to go through the concert circuit, which is unfortunately how he became addicted and how he became homeless.
Mhm.
But he spent years on the road with different bands. And so I guess I'm so out of touch, I'm old, but I guess this is a thing now. Kids love 70s music. So a bunch of the kids in the class, they wanted to know about this band and this.
That's
And
so
then
wonderful.
the other two guys had also gone to lots of concerts and are of that era. So this became this whole 70s culture exchange, and they were laughing, and it was just so much fun. And we all had our coffees and our beverage, coffee or tea. The men had I had all had their McDonald's fun coffees, frappuccinos, and the kids had theirs. And so it was just really fun. And in hindsight, that's something I learned, I think, starting out with maybe something like that. But the next Zoom that happened, where there were the focus were serious research questions, the men really opened up and revealed some incredibly personal um, information, and in for the students to really fully understand. And I don't think that would have happened had there not been that fun Zoom before, where
Right,
they really
right.
communicated. So, for me, the point for students is to try to make some changes for the mission. They have very serious problems right now.
Mhm.
They need funding, and funding is lacking. It was lacking before, and now it's even worse. The economy is in
I'm
bad
sure.
shape. we're going to have a proliferation of homeless individuals. This is already being predicted because of the economy. So how does the mission brace for that? The mission can only take men. Their women facility can only hold 5 or 6. They know they need to do something to accommodate more women. They know they need to do something to help the men stay in connection with their families, but they don't have a place for men to even engage or interact with their families. They know that the men need long-term care. The research shows, and this was really interesting, that it takes up to 5 years for an addiction to really get out of your brain
Hmm.
in terms of the cravings and the need. So an 18-month program or staying there for a period isn't enough. So they're starting to create, with buying up blighted and vacant homes and working on rebuilding them, and they're very close because they want the men to keep coming for that
Mm-hmm.
support.
Mm-hmm.
So there's so many opportunities for students to grab. I've got social work students looking at resource issues. I have, ironically, 3 students in this course who were all adopted. One had a homeless mother.
Mm-hmm.
One was also from a difficult situation, and the other was adopted through a family. And so they're really tackling that. How do you keep having a relationship with someone when they're homeless? How do you not let that relationship fall apart? So there's building opportunities later. I have an architect student who's already she's working on the housing issue because
Interesting.
they have an architectural firm they're working with. So I'm trying to sort of take their different pockets and help them, do the research that ultimately that data will help. I mean, I'm hoping the data is data that Bob and the others and the directors and the board members can use to write grants, right, to get funding. And I'm excited then to see what year 2 is going to look like. That's a
Definitely.
really long answer to your question. I'm sorry.
Well, I think that you again, all wonderful information. This is all so interesting, and I think you've slowly begun to like transition into the next question I have for you, um, which is what are some of the benefits of teaching an immersive learning course like this? And you mentioned these students sort of have the ability through your community partner, the Muncie Mission, which works with homeless men and unhoused men in, is it just in the city of Muncie or is it in the county?
The county.
Okay, so within the county. Um, do you find that students who sort of have this direct real world connection have an easier time sort of doing the research thing because they don't have to have sort of abstract ideas in mind? They can sort of say, I know for a fact I'll be working with this community partner and I'll be able to gear my interests and my research towards the efforts and the work that we've been working with these men over what must be 6-ish months by the time they finally hand 6 to 8 once they finally hand in their research paper. So I suppose like generally, what are some of the benefits of that? But more specifically, do you find your students are more easily able to tailor their research towards something meaningful and accessible?
Yeah, for sure. And first semester, right, we really worked on getting, first semester is more 103, so we're more about literature building and doing some of those different types of assignments. And now second semester, they defined their research question at the end of the last semester and started research. Now we're continuing that, but we're also refining the question one more time, which I think is really important. Yes, it is much easier for them to find the research. They have a focus. What do you do with, families with homeless children? So it's been easy for them to get right into the databases and do that. I think what's been difficult is we're still trying to see, what the research paper will look like. I think that's a little different in an immersive learning class because what happens, and in fact, we're getting ready to do another Zoom, is Bob will probably present some new issues. And so they've got to be ready to take that new issue. It's like, so do we stay here in this lane where we've been, or do we take into account these new issues that are coming up? So that's something that the students have had to work on adapting. And I would say this year has been particularly challenging because these are freshmen. They finished their high school year online, and now they've been here.
Right.
And I have freshmen who have 4 online classes. It's tough. It is tough. It is not the ideal way that I've never run an immersive like this, and it's been challenging. I will say that while it's a synchronous, or it's an asynchronous class, I've had weekly required Zooms, and those have been incredibly helpful. I find times at work, and last semester I had 3 different cohorts, so they had to come 1 hour a week depending on their time, and in that groups, they got really close and were really able to do some good work. This semester, we had fewer students. Unfortunately, I lost 4 excellent students in this course. I mean, 4 of some of the
Right.
best. They
Right.
just opted not to return to the university. This is not how they wanted to learn. And let me tell
Right.
you, I tried. And but they left. And so now we all meet together and use breakout rooms. And the students told me last semester, I actually did a midterm sort of questionnaire about how things are going and what works. And I do another one at the end. I don't rely on course evaluations from the university. I have my own system. And kids said over and over, and again, I don't think this is kids trying to get a better grade. They said
Right.
this was
Right.
the best class that I had. This was the most interesting. This was the one I felt like I belonged to. And the kids text me. I think I got a call yesterday. Lainey and Landon were in the library. They were working on this. It's when I make myself very accessible because I think
Interesting.
I do that for all my classes, but immersive, the stakes are higher. We have promised something very important to the men. So we have to honor that. And my kids are doing the fundraiser. They're doing the Walk a Mile in My Shoes. That is next week on February 10th.
Okay.
So we've already raised $226. We're on our way. My goal personally is more than 250, but we set 250. But the kids have been raising money, and uh, 3 of the students, Lainey, Landon, and McKenna, are going to do the walk with President Mearns on
Interesting.
the 10th. So the walk is actually not happening. People are supposed to do a virtual walk, but there's
Right.
a very small faction from the mission with the president, and they're going to do through campus. And my other students are going to be at the scramble light where the walk starts with signs and issues that they've come up with to
Awesome.
showcase their support. So the kids are they're really excited about that. And we do think we're going to be able to get them into the mission. They think the mission is going to be able to get vaccinated.
Oh,
So the
wow.
kids could go in, and that's important. They are just itching to get in there. And in fact, one of the kiddos is applied for a job. So
At the mission.
mhm.
That's wonderful. I think that's sort of a level of dedication that I think a lot of people who have taught a composition course would identify isn't always there in student populations in these types of classes. So that's a really interesting perspective to think that, especially with these students being in this course for 2 semesters with the same group of people, with the same instructor, that is a level of dedication, a level of excitement about the material that they're learning and the work that they're doing that is potentially unusual in this field. So I
Yeah.
think that's valuable information and valuable work that you're doing.
And not all of the students, I'll be frank.
Oh, of
I would say about
course.
half the students who signed up for this class were genuinely interested in this topic and in
Right.
this kind of project. The other half needed a 103 and a 104 class.
Right.
However, however, and there were a couple of students, there are 2 students who were in the course last semester who did not want to proceed, and I understood that, because it requires more work, truthfully. It's good work, but
Absolutely.
it's more time. But the students who didn't really know quite what they were getting into are like, "This is really cool." Like, so they
Awesome.
were pleasantly, surprised. But my attendance is better, my engagement is better, my grades in this section compared to other sections, were better compared to other freshmen that I've had. So
Mhm.
I think it makes a difference. I think all I think all composition classes should be like this. I mean, Marian University uses this model. Butler uses this model. They use it very successfully. Butler has like a humane society, or work with the humane
Mhm.
society animal shelter class, and so they get kids where they want to be in that one. They have a homeless class where they work with Wheeler kids, want to be in that one, and so they give these kids all these different opportunities for those composition courses. And even though it's just a semester, they're really immersed in the community. So I hope, our hope of course is that people will see this as successful and we could run more classes like
Mhm.
this, for sure.
That's fantastic. Well, I think you have sort of already touched on some of the struggles of teaching a course like
Yes.
this semester specifically, this year specifically, with the pandemic in mind. But is there anything else that sort of comes to mind? Any adaptations that you have to make to teaching your immersive learning courses as opposed to teaching a traditional comp course that you might think are worth sharing?
Well, it takes a lot of work on the front end. You
Mhm.
you have to I map out tentatively what I think all 17 weeks will look with. I make sure my community partner and I sit down, we talk about our goals, their goals, our goals, what I have to do with my students, what they need from us. I show them the overview. They ask to make changes. We have to be flexible. I had it all mapped out and then had to flip everything around. We were going to start
Mm,
with the oral history project where the kids were talking with the men were going to communicate with small groups more intimately, and they had a breakout and they're like we just can't help you facilitate this right now. That
right.
the other issues, tech issues, because the men don't have computers or technology, so they have to rely on Bob or one of the other faculty staff to help set that up, and then those folks have to stay. Well, if they have no front desk person, Bob's got to go work the front desk, even though he's in charge of 100 other things. So
Mhm.
that's been somewhat of a struggle, and then I have to make sure I get to the kids to communicate, and sometimes they get confused because they've got this class that meets this day and this class online.
Right, right, right.
So I did learn, I put everything on Canvas and I make it like some kind of a due date, even if it says it's due like today in an hour, because they're like, ah, because they look at their Canvas site, but then they'll read it and they'll go, oh, okay, okay, all
Right,
right,
right, right.
all right, she had to move things around. So I'm learning how to sort of get that information out, and you just have to be anytime you work with a community partner, you have to be flexible, but this is required even more flexibility and it requires
Mm,
more time. So that's why not everybody does it, because it's harder work.
right,
It's
right.
much harder work, but it's more, for me, it's more rewarding. Um, so, and I have kids who are like, if you're gonna do this next year, like, can I come back and help? And can I teach? And
That's
can
great.
I show something? Can I do this? So that's been really cool.
That is
So
fantastic. It seems a theme that you keep bringing up is sort of the idea of connection and community and continuing work within a community. So that's awesome that the students are picking up on that and wanting to be engaged with that.
yeah.
I suppose for a final question, I know I'm curious about what the remainder of the semester or the year looks like for these students. So what's left to do for you, for the students, for the community partner? What's on your docket?
Well, we are working on our first annotated bibliography right now, and I'm using a white paper outline. So students have that problem, that research question. They're getting really good secondary source material to support that problem, to identify that problem. They're pulling good literature from that and have a very
Mhm.
specific system. And then next, they're going to do that oral history where they are going to then talk to the men specifically, and they will record that, they will take photos, they will transcribe that. I will go over in vivo coding and other coding systems with them.
Interesting.
So they're going to get to practice taking that transcript and really code it, and then they're going to recompose that. I have it currently recomposed as an infographic, but I may have
Hmm,
them recompose it into something more creative. I haven't decided. I've got some kids in there that are really creative. I've got some awesome videographers. I've got a couple of
wow.
poets. So we may do some playing with how that oral history gets recomposed, but it also will serve as primary source data for the paper. And they will then complete. they will write that research
Mhm.
paper. Before they do the white paper, though, I'll have another annotated bib where they get solution source data. So I'm never about, let's just talk about the problem. What are actual solutions? That's going to take a lot more time, and Bob's going to be quite a bit more involved because they can't be making political statements like buy more houses. All right, what does that look like,
Right,
right?
right, right, right.
And the kids are working together, even though their topics are different. So I have these two students who are working on funding issues because what people don't realize, if they're a Christian-based organization, they don't have
Mm,
access to government and certain funds. But there are some laws and new things coming out. So it's like, what are ways around that? How can you do that? So Connor and Oliver are working on that. Well, that's directly going to impact Carly's work on housing. So that part will be a bigger part of the semester. I think that solution, that's always the hard thing. Okay, it's easy to talk about the problem. How do you fix it?
right.
Reality fix it. And then we'll do some kind of presentation of that white paper with the mission. And I have this other dream. I don't know if we'll get to it, but the kids early on came up with this idea of see me. And one of the girls one time, I just think this is, I get a little emotional thinking about it,
Mhm.
but we were in this Zoom with Brock and Aaron and Steve, the men, and then and Bob, and they were talking about some pretty tough issues. And Annalise, I always make the kids ask on the chat if they can ask a question. And Annalise is like, "Can I ask a question?" I said, "Sure." And so I stopped and I said, "Annalise wants to ask a question." And she said, "How are you guys doing?
Mm,
How are you feeling?" And it was really emotional because the one guy said, "You know what? Not great,"
mhm.
and they were just really honest. And that was a really revealing, and then the men said, "Well, how about you guys?" And the kids were like, "It's hard, this
Yeah, yeah.
online." And so it really came this sort of a nice moment. And then another student said, Delmanisha, who unfortunately is one of the ones I lost, and she was so good. She said, "What can we do to help people see you?"
Wow.
And so the kids just keep bringing that up, this idea of seeing the men. And so I don't know how that's going to look yet. And the kids know that I don't have everything perfectly ironed out, but is there a way to somehow do something to see the men? I don't know. I'm still playing with that and we're still wrestling with it. So,
That is fantastic. That sounds like such an interesting collaborative thing that you could do to wrap the semester up that would also sort of continue along with the theme of community and working together and building relationships.
yeah.
So that's a fantastic look at what you have going on for the rest of the semester. Thank you for sharing that information
You're
as
welcome.
well.
You're welcome.
Um, I know that you have to run soon. But is there anything else you'd like to say just to sort of wrap this up? Anything you'd like to mention or anything that you feel we didn't cover?
No, I guess I would just say to other writing program instructors or other faculty anywhere,
Mhm.
right? These kinds of projects, yeah, they take more time, um, but just that connection with your students and your connection to the community, and that you leave your mark. I always say I have two homes because I live on the north side of Indianapolis, right? And I have Indianapolis as my home and Muncie as my home. And I
Mhm.
don't want to just get a paycheck at the university and teach. I really want to show the community that I appreciate them and value them. And I love making those connections with my students. So I would just encourage people, if you're worried or afraid or if you've never done it, there's so much help that can help you do it. And you can start small and you can build, but it really makes a difference in your teaching life. And helps you get up and want to go and do all those things every day. And I just hope the university will continue to let us do these kinds of things. The English department will continue to let us do these kinds of things, that we can just keep working in that capacity, because the I think it's the answer to retention and recruitment. Also, I really do. I think that students they're more engaged. The material's more authentic.
Hmm.
They constantly say,
Mm,
"Well, we're so tired of taking all the Common Core classes. We want real world experiences." Well, that's what this is,
interesting.
and it makes a difference. It really does. So I guess that would be my final like plug.
It's a great plug. It really is. I think ending on that idea of authenticity is so interesting because that's sort of where I see this type of work residing in authentic, real community work. So I'm glad that that's where we got to.
Yeah, and
Um,
I think for folks, I
mhm,
mean, I'm widely published and I do that, although I don't have to. I'm a contract, right? But if you're
mhm.
interested in publications and presentations, I I am invited. I mean, my last immersive, I got 3 conference invitations. I didn't even apply. I got 3 articles. I mean, you can get IRB. It's like built in for you. So
Right, right.
if that's part of your worry that if I do an immersive learning, these things won't happen. In fact, it opens up the door for that.
I love that extra incentive kick in there. That's always a good thing.
I'm
um,
married to a tenure line, so I know how it works.
that is fair. But I just wanted to say one more time, just thank you for doing this, Dr. Jones, Dr. J, for opening up your time to having this conversation with me and to sharing with the rest of the faculty here what great work you all do.
Thank you. Thanks, Zach, for working with us. We appreciate
Of course. Thank you one more time.
it.
And that'll be where we wrap up. All
Awesome.
right.
And I love your guys' newsletter, by the way. There's good, I'm always getting